the April 7th meeting of the Sierra Vista Council work session to order. We're about 5 minutes late, so it's 3:05. Joe, did you want to do a discussion on the procedures for the remote meeting?
Well, things do not seem to be working quite right. However, everyone is unmuted right now because we can't identify all of the callers. So if you could please bear in mind that any back is going to come right over the speakers. And so if you could be in a quiet area, move to a quiet area, that is great. When we get to any item that requires input from an attendee, we will be able to hear you. You are unmuted, so the mayor will ask the question of you and you should be able to respond. After the work session, that's about it.
Okay, everybody ready to fly this Zeppelin? Okay, first item is the April 9th council meeting, and you should have an agenda available. Obviously, we'll start with the roll call, the invocation, pledge, and the prayer. Excuse me for being redundant there. Item 1 is the acceptance of the agenda. Does anybody have any comments on the agenda as proposed?
No, sir.
No.
Okay, I'm hearing no. All right. So next thing would be the city manager's report. Mr. Patuchik, do you have anything that you want to share today? Your city manager's report.
Again, I don't have the basically we haven't a lot of our normal.
Okay, we'll cover that later on in another item. Public hearing items, the first item. It's about the community development block grants. Matt, are you on?
Yes, Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of council, we're recommending that this item be continued to your next regular meeting as we're awaiting word from HUD on if, when, and how the CARES Act funding that was just approved by Congress for coronavirus assistance needs to be factored into our annual action plan for the upcoming year. HUD is still writing the rules for the $5 billion that was in the stimulus bill for CDBG. The city's allocation is just under $160,000. As stated in the award letter that we received just this morning and was added to your packet, HUD has suspended the normal 15% cap on public services and will allow the city to reimburse costs of eligible activities incurred during our local pandemic response. HUD will be sending out bulletins that further describes the CARES Act provisions, flexibilities, and implementation guidance. Our regular deadline for submitting the annual action plan is 45 days prior to the start of the program year, or May 15th. Preliminary indications are that this deadline will be extended. Just in case, I applied for and received a waiver from HUD to reduce our regular 30-day public comment period down to 15 days, so we stay on track. In the award letter, HUD encourages us to consider approaches that prioritize the unique needs of low and moderate income persons and the development of partnerships between all levels of government and private and for-profit and nonprofit sectors as we develop our plan. Prior to assigning the funds, it's advised that we consult with state and local health authorities, which we're doing. The draft annual action plan is based on the initial guidance received at the March 12th City Council meeting. The plan recommends the original allocation amount of $271,810 go to making required improvements to Eddie Sear Park on the former Public Works Yard property at 1224 North Avenue. This recommendation was formulated prior to the World Health Organization declaring the coronavirus a pandemic. At this time, we don't know how long the emergency will last. While we don't have all the technical details yet from HUD, the congressional intent of the CARES Act funding is to bolster local resources in addressing the pandemic now, not later. So we started brainstorming as soon as the CARES Act funding was announced. One idea that we're exploring is to initiate a door-to-door delivery program for seniors, similar to Meals on Wheels. Only our version of the program would engage up to 10 locally owned restaurants to participate and prepare the meals, thus providing a local economic development benefit. CDBG could pay a restaurant a reasonable amount per meal, somewhere between $12 and $15. We put them on a rotation and offer 2 to 3 choices for variety and accommodate preferences. Sign up would be on a first come, first served basis with the initial limit of 150 people. Portions would be large enough to last 2 meals. Service would be provided weekdays. We need to work out the logistics on order taking and delivery, but it could involve non-critical city staff who are underutilized or taking leave because of the shutdowns. We can also potentially use transit buses for the transport of the food and the runners and divide the city into delivery zones on the geographic distribution of the participants. If we can get clearance from HUD, we'd like to try to launch the service in early May and operate it for 3 months.
Matt,
It provides both a public health and economic development benefit.
Matt, this is Mayor Mueller. I appreciate the initiative, but this is something we probably need to talk about. I thought today's issue was, the issue for today was, is anybody on the council going to be concerned about tabling this item until 23 April? Give you more time to develop your ideas and more time to work with other agencies. Didn't apply this time for CDGB. To ensure that they're considered in the decision.
I don't have an issue tabling it, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question though.
Okay.
Matt, this is William. I know you brought up what the bump was because of the CARES Act. Can you tell us one more time what the bump in what the bump in funds were?
Just under $160,000.
Okay.
And we're learning what strings are attached in the coming weeks. So, but is earmarked for responding to the coronavirus pandemic.
I appreciate that.
Is somebody trying to get on?
Mayor, this is Rachel. I just want to say that I have no issue tabling it. I think it's probably the right thing to do.
I agree.
Is there any other concerns?
To be tabled as well.
Okay, thank
Can
you,
I
Christine.
hear me? Can I make a comment? This is Sarah. Just a couple comments, if I may. I have no problem tabling as well and give a little more time to think through. I know that the emergency folks at the county were doing a needs assessment throughout the county, and might be good to talk to them about what they've discovered as needs that have arisen due to the COVID crisis. I think that would be a worthwhile conversation when we're looking at where to direct funds, especially for COVID relief. That was my comment.
And I don't disagree with you. I think we need to talk to the homeless shelter, some of the other food providers as well. They might have good ideas. That's why I didn't want Matt to go too far down on his idea.
Well, that was
That's
my
not what we're
second
discussing today. We're discussing whether we should wait. And I'm getting the consensus that we should wait.
Agreed.
And that's staff's recommendation.
Okay, that's staff's ultimate recommendation anyway. Sarah, did you have something?
Nope.
Carolyn? No, okay. All right, then that I'll direct the staff to remove item 2 from the agenda, and we'll pick that up at the next regular meeting. We now move on to new business, and the item 3 is the approval of the regular city council meeting minutes for March 12, 2020. Is there any additions, completions, corrections, etc., that need to be done at this time?
Not for me. This is
Okay.
Christine.
Thank you, Christine.
I didn't see anything.
I didn't see anything, Mayor. Sarah.
Okay, so we're ready to move on. We're ready to move on to the next item.
Roger that.
Okay, the next item on our agenda under new business is the ordinance changes. And I guess we're gonna have Matt again, or we're gonna have Jeff.
Matt here.
Okay, Matt, go.
This is, the final reading on the proposed amendments to the subdivision regulations. As you recall, our recommendations went through an extensive review process with our Planning and Zoning Commission. It resulted in a unanimous vote of approval. No comments were received during the 30-day public review period that followed the public hearing held by council on February 13th. I'd be glad to give a brief refresher if so desired. On the
Please.
substance of the amendments. Okay, so first, we're seeking to provide for a more streamlined process for minor subdivisions of 10 lots or fewer where there are existing streets forming the boundary. It's outside of a floodplain or erosion setback area and utility services are readily available. In those cases, the applicant could go straight to the final plat stage, saving time. This process is geared to infill sites where infrastructure is already in place and where we're already trying to facilitate redevelopment. We're also building in a process that doesn't currently exist for minor amendments to an existing approved plat. Currently, any change, no matter the significance, must be approved by council. The proposed amendments would allow a property owner to correct errors, adjust drainage or maintenance easement boundary, or adjust lots in a manner that doesn't increase lots or change existing utility easements, street access, or other public dedications. The adjustments cannot exceed 50% of the total lots identified in the plat. This is useful in those cases where a developer wants to combine smaller lots into larger lots based on changes in market demand. Because density is being reduced, the action wouldn't affect the water adequacy certificate. The minor amendments would need to be administratively approved versus going through a full replat process. There's also no mechanism in the code for doing a land split in an existing platted subdivision without going through the full replatting process. Code requires owner permission on the application. So in cases where those lots within a subdivision have been sold off, poses a challenge in gathering signatures from all the owners in the subdivision. Pursuant to state laws, apply to lot divisions consisting of 2 or 3 lots in a property 2.5 acres or less. The review would be administrative and can be conducted in under 30 days. You'll remember in regards to the performance security, which is in place to ensure that public improvements are constructed according to city standards. We're recommending allowing sidewalks to be deferred until after a home is constructed, but no longer than 5 years from the plat approval date. This was requested by developers who are having to replace damaged sidewalks post-construction from the heavy equipment operators during the construction. ADA is a priority, which is why we're recommending a 5-year maximum time frame. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Betting, you have any questions?
No, sir, Mr. Mayor, I'm good.
Ms. Humphrey?
No, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Wolf?
No, sir. No questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Pacheco?
No, sir.
And Ms. Gray? Okay. So, hopefully we'll get that passed coming up next week. And then, of course, we'll have the comments and requests of council followed by adjournment. So the next item on the agenda for today is presentation and discussion of development fees. And it's going to be
Mr. Felix.
Mr. Felix. We're looking forward to this, David. There, brother.
Me? Can you hear me?
Steve?
The theory behind this kind of give a history here of how this, where development fees came from, since I think you were the only one who has been around for a few of these iterations. The theory is impact fees are to assess capital construction to new residents for their weight onto the community. Current resident shouldn't pay for all of the infrastructure and all of the costs associated to having to add facilities to keep a level of service. Important point is development fees are for capital improvements only. They're not to cover operating expenses. I've got a simple example here.
David, if you're using the slides, you need to tell us which slide you're on.
I can't see the slides.
Neither can we. That's why I'm saying.
I can see 'em.
Yeah, I see.
There they are. She's got them coming up now.
Oh,
Slide,
We're on slide 3. Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Simple example, right?
Yeah. Simple example
Go ahead.
is. Simple example is a community has 10,000 people in it and currently has one fire station, one police station, and they're all sized to fit the current community perfectly. No excess capacity. City expects to double their size, their population in 10 years due to events going on in the area. To maintain the current level of service, you'll have to add one fire station and one police station to service the new 10,000 people moving in. So that police station and fire station construction should be charged to the new homeowners as their homes are being built. The operation, the salaries would be in the overall tax revenues would come from everybody. That's kind of the simple example to try and show everybody how it easily works. We started the development impact fees back in 2005 with a final implementation starting in 2006.
Forward now, man.
We first came in November, December with a proposal. We got input from the developers. The two big changes the developers wanted was they wanted to have a 25% reduction in the police, fire, and infrastructure fees, with the offset being done by a 0.7% extra construction sales tax. So the construction sales tax was 2.45 instead of 1.75. The second item that they wanted was to increase the number of houses that were going to be constructed in their estimate over the next 10 years versus what the original consultant had proposed. Council agreed to both of those. A key point that is brought up in a future slide is, at that time, construction sales tax was defined differently. When you had your hot water heater changed at your house, that was construction sales tax. When you had a remodel done at your house, that was construction sales tax. So all of those type of constructions were also included in the revenue that was generated to offset the developer fees. As you can see, there the original fees total about $5,300 per home. With the offset, they were actually reduced to $4,600 per house. A few years back, in 2017, Council did approve a moratorium on the current fees that were outstanding. That moratorium expires June 30th, 2020. The current fees that were approved in 2016 will go into effect with the 25% offset still in place. Next slide. To put in perspective some of the changes that have gone on, the state legislature has adjusted these, messed with these, put all sorts of new laws into place over time to make more restrictions on them, a little more difficult to do things. For instance, you saw library had an impact fee in the initial time that is no longer allowed. Over time, our sales tax rate has increased from 1.75 to 1.95. So the offset differential is now only 0.5% instead of a full percent. The average new house price has increased about $100,000 since then. And a key point to that is, on that last bullet point, that extra $100,000, the offset can no longer be an aggregate total sales tax, construction sales tax collected. It has to be an estimate based off the house construction sales tax. So it wouldn't necessarily be a 25% offset for the difference. It would be some random number based off the tax difference. And finally, the tax code has changed with their simplification, and I use that in quotes, task force that they did in their simplification package passed 4 years ago. Those remodels, those home improvements are no longer considered construction sales tax. So when you place your hot water heater, Now it's taxed like you take your car in. You pay tax on the unit, and labor is no longer charged. So they've really redefined the construction sales tax, which affects that half-cent difference. Any questions on environmental changes or anything to this point? Yep.
Christine, I actually do have a quick question, but are we still just talking kind of about the history and what's been going on? Because the
Yes.
question kind of goes forward. Okay, then no. I do have a question, but it's not on the history. I understand that piece.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the next slide. We're working on our study. We're getting ready for all the legal steps that we have to go through, and it's a very tight timeline, very specific, set by the state. And to kind of give you just an idea before we get started running through the whole process and you get overwhelmed by a report from a consultant, our staff recommendation is to remove the 25% offset and remove the construction privilege tax to 1.95 that the current retail sales tax is at. And then the new proposed fees would be about $5,300 per house. I did put a comparison here of the original fees in 2006. I adjusted those original fees forward based off the construction cost index for every year since 2006 to 2019. And you see if we adjusted it by the inflation factor, the impact fees would now be at $7,200 per house. And the current fee outstanding right now is $4,000. So the big changes you can see is parks, and that has to do with the deficit in that fund, which we'll get to next. Next, any questions on the fees before I go to the next slide? You'll get a full detail, more than you'd ever want to know about this report from the consultant here and shortly. Slide. The fees were calculated to cover the following items over the next 10 years. 3 of the development fee funds have negative fund balances because construction was done out of them. Parks, the big one was Sears Center Park improvements, when we initially did all the soccer fields and all of that. The police station was the police station expansion. Fire department is Fire 3 and the detention basin for it, and Tower 3. Those are the 3 that are all history. That's why those funds have a deficit. The bonds are paid off, and so since the build out construction housing rate was not what was originally put in the first fee set in 2006, we have excess capacity in those, and so the theory is all the new houses are buying into those facilities that we have. So that's the theory behind repaying the deficit. And honestly, the deficit is kind of an accounting measure. We took out the bond payments from there, and then it borrowed cash from funds that have cash to loan the fund money. So it's not that we owe anyone else this. We owe ourselves an accounting under the fund accounting rules. In the infrastructure development fee fund, we have an estimate to construct a 1/2 lane mile of arterial road or collector streets over the next 10 years. And that's likely going to be the first part of the Buffalo Soldier extension eastward. And we figure 1/2 mile is probably what we're going to get. Point and why we put the 1/2 lane mile is with this study, you have to spend this money within 10 years. You have to start the project within 10 years of approving this plan, or you have to give all the unused money back to the developer. Key point there is for the developer, not the homeowner who actually paid for it in their house.
David, this is Mayor Mueller. I'd like to ask Mr. Patuchek to step in. He's looks like he's getting ready to jump out of his skin over here. Go ahead, Mr. Patuchek.
You got it.
Yep.
Hey, Dave. Actually, I'm not jumping out of my skin yet. So, but you're doing a good job of explaining it. A couple points I want to make to the council since this was implemented in 2006. The year 2006 is a key date because at that time we were experiencing a high rate of growth in the community, and council at the time determined that development fees would be necessary to help construct future infrastructure for the community. Of course, we all know what happened in 2008, 2009, shortly after the fees were implemented. Construction basically went flat, and we're then not receiving any development fees for new home construction for a long period of time during the recession period that we went through. The project, in terms of parks, the police substation or the police expansion all occurred during that time with hopes that the development fee would pay for those particular projects. Of course, when no development fees came in, we needed to make sure that our debts were covered during that time. So we did use capital improvements funds to do that, and that's why David is saying this is an accounting exercise. Those funds did in fact pay for it, and the money came out of those funds, but the debt service payments actually came out of the capital improvements funds. So what you're seeing is really a continuation of the fee structure from that time, with really hardly any new projects added to those to that list. So we're just continuing on with where we should have been way back in 2008 in terms of having the future development fees cover the costs in those funds.
Okay, David?
Okay. And understand too, a key point of our ordinance is these fees need to be reviewed every 3 to 5 years, everything reassessed. So if changes occur, we think some new development may be coming in now, council can always reassess the fees at that time and add new projects to the projected list. For instance, you could add an extra half lane mile of the roadway at that time, or go less if you think things are changing in a negative way. So every 3 to 5 years, we are required by ordinance to reassess the fees and what is happening and what is going into those fees. Happy to answer any other questions anyone has.
Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think, where is she? Miss, did you get, I don't see you on my list. Are you still there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Okay.
I actually understand the development fees, and I really am in favor of them for the most part. My one big question is, based on the current environment, do we expect people to stop building at all?
Good question.
I don't know who to direct this to see who's got the biggest crystal ball. I would assume that there's going to be a delay. Now, whether that's 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, I don't know. I know one of the projects I drove by today, the guys are still out there getting things ready. So obviously that developer seems to think 6 months down the road, he's going to have people buying houses. So, I don't know. Anybody got any better thoughts?
Mayor, Councilwoman Wolf, the articles yesterday was the fact that unlike 2008 and 2009, where there is a glut of housing on the market, nationwide, there's not the glut that was there. And some people are predicting that the housing market will lead us out of this recession that we may be facing.
Thank you, David. Chuck?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Ms. Wolf, that's a really good question, and it probably does require a crystal ball. But, given the current housing market in Sierra Vista and how existing home sales have been going, they've been actually doing real well. And I think that bodes well for the construction of new homes. But I think you're probably looking at later on this year for that to really flesh itself out. The fees then would not really be implemented until about that time anyway. Otherwise, we're still working off the old set fees that are coming off the moratorium. So the timing in terms of implementation of this is probably still okay in my mind.
Okay, that was really my big question is I don't want to put fees on if it's going to stop construction at the time just because of the craziness. But I do believe, I agree that the fees are probably called for and we're probably at the point in time that we can bring them back.
I think we all can agree that we don't want to add additional burdens. Good question. Thank you. Mr. Benning.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, some clarifications from constituents who's been asking and making comments. We're talking residential development fees, right? Not commercial.
Both.
Fees.
Both.
It would be both.
So business, so.
Any new construction that adds capacity, it affects residential, commercial, industrial.
Thank you. I agree with Christine. I think this is a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Benning. Anybody else?
Mayor, I'd just like to jump in here, please. This is Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel.
So I was just going to say that it's been my experience in dealing with developers and people who are doing development and new construction that development fees neither make nor break a project. So us having them, most developers understand the benefit of us having them as a city and why we need them.
Okay. Anybody else? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
I've been here the whole time.
Well, you've been here the whole time. I guess I just wasn't, you weren't showing on my list here. Okay. Anybody else?
This is Sarah.
Sarah.
Yes, I will tell you that my initial response when I first was reviewing materials on the theory that development fees are based, on the theory that the developer should, or, the development should pay for the increase to infrastructure needs and the city and town shouldn't, or like the citizens of the town shouldn't have to pay for that. That doesn't sit well with me. Just that concept of, that doesn't sit well with me, that idea that we all don't benefit from development and can't pay. And then the things that we've used development fees for, parks and police and fire, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that's even how that fund is being used. Just from the outset, concept isn't sitting well with me. And I know I need to probably do a lot more research into it. Right now, it just doesn't make sense to me.
And the one, if I may, I just add one more thing for you to think about is kind of the opposite philosophy is why should somebody who's been here 50 years pay for a new park, pay for a new police station, pay for 2 more police officers or 2 more firefighters? They've already essentially through their taxes paid for their fair share. And that's the other side of the argument. I'm not taking that side, but I just throwing it out there for thought.
But that, on that point, then do they not benefit from new development? I mean, do they not?
Well, to a point they do. And one of the struggles we had when we went through this the first time was trying to figure out what that happy medium is, because there's going to be benefit no matter what happens from the current structure to the new folks, but there is also going to be benefit the other way. So this is something you just have to think through and try to look at all sides.
That's what I'm trying to do. I guess I see really clearly the benefit when there's a huge development and that development requires, a massive road being built to it or an extension of city services into a whole new area of town, like we will definitely see with Tribute and others, but on each house or each thing individual where we don't have to build a new road to let them build their house or something like that.
I'll let Mr. Matuchek make a comment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Pacheco, your last point really kind of gets at the heart of the theory of development impact fees, because what we're looking at really is an expansion of infra capacity for the community as a result of new development. So yes, if there is a large development that requires, expansion of an arterial roadway or something like that, then that's the theory behind it. That development should help to pay for that expansion of that roadway. You brought up Tribute as an example, and although right now we don't have this particular project in the development fee schedule, when we first developed our development fees back in 2006, it was envisioned that a combined police substation and another fire station would be built in the Tribute area, with the hopes then that the Tribute development would bear the most of the load in terms of paying for that particular infrastructure. So, there's different theories in terms of looking at who should pay for what. But that's the theory behind the development impact fees, is to actually pay for that increased capacity for the community.
All right, anything else?
I'm just thinking through it, but thank you.
Okay, well, we got time.
Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Gwen. I missed the early part of the meeting. I'm just curious, did you already discuss the 25% reduction in PD, fire department, and infrastructure to the development fee? Is that a part of this discussion?
You talking which slide? You talking recommendations on slide 6?
Quite honestly, I don't know where we are. That one probably.
One under history.
Recommendation is to remove the 25% offset.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I can address
That's right.
Mr. Mayor, I can address that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Calhoun. Back in 2006, there were concerns about, particularly from the development community, about going from basically zero for development fees in the town to the proposed $5,300 or so per unit. And at that time, we negotiated with the development community and came upon the idea to increase the construction sales tax to offset the size of the fees, and that's how we ended up at the $4,600 or so fee. And the reason for raising the construction sales tax at the time was the law basically stated that if you did a development fee study and it showed that the fee should be $5,300, that the general fund or some other funds of the city would have to make up the difference in that fee in order to make funds whole. So that's why the sales tax was increased at that time to provide the offset. What we're currently proposing from the staff perspective is to remove the 25% sales tax.
Okay, I've lost it.
Fees at 100%.
Okay, I see it now. Thank you so much. I appreciate that explanation.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you, Gwen. Anybody else on this item? Okay, thank you, David. We appreciate it. We'll go on to the next item, which is the discussion of the FY21 budget, capital and debt. And Ms. Osborne is going to do this. Jennifer, are you on?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, David is going to actually discuss the first part of it for the debt.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Chuck.
And Mr. Mayor and members of the council, before David and John do this, This is on the expenditure side of the budget, and I know there's going to be questions later when we talk about the current emergency state that we're in with COVID-19. So we don't quite yet have the revenue projections finished because we're in the process of adjusting the revenue projections downward. And in your next budget work session, we'll be going over the revenue projections and the new numbers that we're coming up with. And that's an effort to make things a little bit more conservative. So we're starting with
capital list.
Oh, I can't hear them.
Sorry, I can't hear whoever's speaking.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
We're looking at it right now, Ms. Humphrey.
Thank you.
No. Can you hear him?
No, no, sir.
Try it again. You want to come over here and talk? Yeah, well, we think it went to sleep on him, so we're getting it checked out, guys. If not, he can come over and use my machine. We'll social distance. Okay. Don't break my machine, Chuck.
It's Chuck.
So, sorry about that, members of the council. My machine just went black on me. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make a few introductory remarks before David and Jen get started. Primarily that regards the revenues. Normally, we would start the process with our revenue projections. However, we're in the process of revising those revenue projections downward in response to the current COVID-19 emergency that we're facing. As a result, as we go through the debt, those are obviously expenses that we will have to pay because we're obligated to do so. The capital list currently that's being recommended will probably need to be reviewed as we go through the process, depending on how our revenues stack up. It's possible that some of those items may end up having to be cut at that point. So we're giving you what we have currently. And then as we continue on with the revenues and go through the budget process, we'll be able to update you in terms of how those recommendations may change. And I'll turn you back to the mayor now.
Did that answer the questions? Okay, so I guess we're going to David.
Yep, I'll go ahead and start. Kennedy, as Chuck mentioned on the overview, through January, we're in good shape. Local sales taxes are at 5.67% over fiscal year 19 and almost 7% over budget.
And you mean revenue, not taxes, right?
The tax revenue. Yeah,
Yeah.
TPT revenue.
Yeah.
Just TPT revenue. And of that growth, 241,000 is from internet sales tax revenue from October through January. So there's some good news. Given the lag now, the extra month's lag because of the tax reporting, we're going to start with zero growth. We're going to keep the budget level to where it's at right now. That will obviously change every month as data comes in. And obviously the big hit is going to be the middle of March's numbers, which we'll get in April, maybe into May. So you can see that we have a bit of a lag. Urban revenue sharing is from last year. So that's a solid number, except for the little census, which we don't get final numbers until the end of May, beginning of June. As we all know, they made a mistake. So we know that number will go down from what the state gave us, and we will ratchet that down to our estimate of where it'll be. And their state shared estimate was based on pre-COVID-19 conditions. And the last we heard from the league is They're looking at revising it, but don't know what they're gonna do yet. Take it down from where it's at. So as we get updated figures from the league and the state, we'll update these and keep you informed.
Questions for David?
Next question.
Okay.
This is Sarah.
Yes.
Just we were saying that the census, we know that they made the mistake for 2019, but when I first read that, I guess I was thinking the 2020 census, that won't affect us till the next budget cycle, correct?
The one that they just put in will affect us for fiscal year 21. That's the one based off current year figures.
Okay.
You lose $250,000 in state shared income tax and state shared sales tax based off of fiscal year 20 numbers. Initial estimates has our share growing by $1.5 million. So probably $300,000 to $400,000 would be the loss due to the census mistake. And then however the valley has been growing to us versus now would just increase that deficit.
Has there been any conversation about, how COVID-19 is going to impact our census numbers?
No.
That's one of the things we need to continue to push as we're talking to folks. I got mine a couple of weeks ago and filled it out and got it sent back in, and they need to do that as soon as possible. That's something they can do on home on the computer, or they can wait till they send them a paper copy to mail in. So it's really easy, but we just need to continue to push people to respond.
And Tony has made a good effort to get into the loop. Tony and Mike have made a good effort to get into the loop to try and prevent this from happening in the future. So good job to them for trying to get this fixed in years going forward.
Yeah, one of the things I need to add here too, so the council knows, while I don't have much hope for this, we are working with the legislators, our state legislators, to see if we can get a fix for the miscount in numbers. But again, that's going to be a long shot. Okay, anything else on David? What's the next slide?
Jen, do you want to do this one or shall I continue?
Are we talking about the budget considerations?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so there is going to be a PRS increase for next fiscal year. We do have the breakdown costs if you need them. The next one that we're considering is the second phase of the classification and comp, and then the annual 2% step increase. The third consideration we have is for the Park Development Fund repayment that David was talking about earlier. Any questions on the consideration?
Do we have a basic idea of the PSPRS increase or percentage? Any guess?
For fiscal year 21, it looks like an increase for PD will be 4.69%, and for fire it'll be 9.86%.
ARS stays flat? Can I assume that?
As far as I know. So the total increase is projected to be about $538,330.
Wow.
Just an increase.
The increase?
That's the increase. So for police, the total will be $2,915,168. For fire, it's $2,047,110.
Chuck?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, with regards to the PRS.
A few things that we are concerned about. One, we have been making our payments early. We've been paying the full budgeted amount every year. So we are in effect making payments to PSPRS. However, even though we are taking steps to try and address the position that from a liability standpoint, We continue to see these increases in PSPRS invoices to the city every year. This year, over $500,000. And, I don't think I need to, mention, since everybody's probably, their retirement accounts are probably hurting at the moment. I can't see where PSPRS is going to do any better in terms of their investments than anybody else that's listening. So that could be a really, really major concern for us a year or so from now.
One thing we did discover recently is when we make an extra payment, it takes 3 years to work through and actually appear. So the fiscal year 2021 contribution rates finally incorporated in 2018 when we told them to keep the fire credit of $83,000. That is shown up for next year's valuation. The items, the extra payments we made in 2019 will show up in 2022's numbers.
And David, I know I've talked to you about this before. I'll talk to you about it again. If they're holding the money for a year or two, I want to make sure we're getting whatever the minimum interest is off that. And I know we've talked about that before. It's a hard thing to do, but again, we can continue to pursue that.
Well, they've historically underperformed everybody else.
I understand. Okay, not good news. Anybody else on this budget considerations? Okay.
I'm sorry, Miss. I'm sorry. This is me again, Christine. And I looked through this earlier, so I may be bringing this up too soon. And Mr. Felix, please tell me if I'm bringing it up too soon. One of my major concerns, and I'm hoping we're addressing it in the budget, is that our TPT is going to be considerably down.
Good, how are you?
At least for March and definitely for April.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Right now, based on the numbers that we've received, and we have figures through January. January was unbelievable. We actually had over 10% increase in revenues. Now, I know that we're going to see a hit here as a result of the situation that we're in. So as what we're trying to do is we are recommending almost a 6% or increase in terms of sales tax revenues next fiscal year, which was a combination of the growth we are seeing historically here over the past year or so, and the increase in internet sales tax. What we're doing, we're taking that from a 6% growth level to a 0% growth level in order to make our sales tax projections more conservative next fiscal year. As we continue to get more data in and we see what the impacts of the crisis are on our revenues, we'll continue to make adjustments. And if we need to take them down even further, we will do that before council is in a position to approve the budget.
Thank you, Chuck. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And can I add,
Christine?
A silver lining to this is the fact that we now have those internet sales. So as people are shopping from home, from Amazon and wherever else they are, that is now sales tax revenue to us that 5 months ago we would not have received.
Thank you, David. Anything else under budget consideration slide? Hearing nothing, we'll go to the debt slide.
Okay. Real quick. This is the standard one. We finance certain capital projects depending on the life of the project, the cost of the project, and our expected cash flow. We prefer to cash projects out if possible. We do match the term of the financing to the life expectancy of the capital asset. So we're not going to finance a police car for 10 or 15 years. And we're not going to finance a building for 3. We got 2 types of debt that we do use: bonds, which are long-term. We do not go out for bonds very often. And we've got short-term lease purchases, which is what we do for the vehicles and refuse trucks and similar things like that. For next fiscal year, we're really only looking at financing 2 items this year. One is in the general fund, the fire pumper truck. And the second one is plant upgrades out at the sewer plant, which we're looking at being part of the Schneider project. Depending on how the revenues are coming in here, we will try to cash out the pumper truck if we can to avoid hitting debt service next year. If we're able to do that, the general fund debt service would be level. And the sewer plant will depend on the timeline for it, whether it looks like it'll be completed by the end of this fiscal year or not. So we may have to carry the financing over for that until next year. So the next slide is just a comparison of the debt. The reason for the $250,000 decrease in the capital improvements fund is those were debt costs associated with issuing the bonds for the Schneider project. The increase in the capital improvements fund is the fact that those bonds are now out there and we are paying those off every year. So if we're able to avoid the financing on the fire truck and the sewer plant does get pushed back to the next year, you're looking at about only a $200,000 increase in debt service, and that would be all in the capital improvements fund. Any questions?
Next slide, please.
Okay, Jen?
The next slide discusses the fiscal year 21 proposed debt service. It goes down to east with the fiscal year 20 budgeted, and then the proposed for 21 and what the difference in each one is. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Oh.
Okay. So this part of the presentation is where we discuss the capital portion of the budget. Please make sure you're on the slide titled the capital improvement request. So this slide is the prioritized list of the capital requests that we're going to incorporate into the fiscal year 21 budget. For items 1 and 2, this is the final year of a 3-year program to replace the fire department's medical monitors and SCBA units. And these items will not have to be replaced again for another 5 to 7 years. So number 3 is the emission control devices for the fire engine. This is going to be an important addition because of the upcoming legislation that's expected to pass. And then for the EMS substation, staff recently mailed the request to BLM for the change of use for the land. We're currently waiting on that approval. Number 5 is the school land acquisition. Number 6 is the Avenue Escuela extension with the culvert bridge. So last work session, I told you that the hydrology study was underway and staff is currently researching a good contact for Walmart, which is proving difficult. Walmart is expected to pay half the cost of this project. Number 7 is the animal control expansion. The design process has just begun for it, and the estimate cost for the project is $2 million, but we're going to be discussing a cost share with Cochise County.
There's no agreement yet on that, right, Jen?
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Are the cost estimates total cost? Is that with the half Walmart pay or with the cost share with the county?
Oh, the cost share with the county is just for animal control expansion.
No, I understand. The cost estimate though, is that the total cost estimate or is that our share for each one?
Well, I believe it's total.
Okay, thank you.
For number 8, the PD is down to only 1 locker for the female locker room. And then also, since dispatch has moved to CCOM, the old communication center space is being looked at to repurpose. So both of those areas need to be renovated. Number 9 is the surface water master plan. So this is the completion of a multi-year effort. The raw data will be compiled into a final report. 10 is there are 4 requests for roof repairs, 1 at the library, 1 at Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 2, and then the PD needs a recoating on the roof. Last.
If I may, this is Christine. And you may not have this information at your fingertips, but we're down to one locker, you said, for females at the police department. How many females do we have on staff?
Approximately, Chuck, you got approximate estimate? I know there are many more than there used to be.
And the reason I'm asking this question is because I know it's ranked number 8, but if we have a lot of females and they're all sharing one locker, we might need to bump.
That's unacceptable. I agree.
We absolutely do need to take care of that situation.
This is Chief Thrasher. Can you hear me?
Yes,
sir.
So each female officer and some of our civilian staff has an individual locker. We just have one open at the moment. So as we hire more female officers is what we would need more lockers for.
I see. Okay, so I understand. So we're not asking people to share a locker. We just at this point can't hire any more females.
If we did hire females, they would be sharing lockers. Yes.
What if we split those projects up?
I think that's important, and I think we need more than number 8, in my opinion.
I agree. If we could split those projects up between the locker room and the communications center, we might be able to get the locker room higher.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, these are very good questions. And right now, it's our hope that all of the projects that you see on the list, that there will be money available in next year's budget, despite the downward revisions in revenue to complete them. So it's our hope to accomplish them all as we move in. That the revenue shortages will affect that, then we will come back to you and get your priorities before the budget is approved.
Okay, thank you, Chuck.
Any other questions on this list?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the animal control expansion, can we go into that a little bit? Isn't that a little bit premature?
Chuck?
Mr. Mayor, that was Sarah, right? So,
Yeah, Sarah.
Woman Pacheco. Basically, what we're doing is we're in the process of designing an expansion of the animal control facility. As you're aware, capacity sometimes gets pushed to the limit, even without other animals. And as you know, we do have the agreement with City right now, although that's not a large load on us. We are doing that. But because of the Huachuca City agreement and situation, when they lost their animal control shelter, the county has been looking for other ways to address their animal control needs and capacity. And we've been in discussions off and on with them probably for a good year or so now with regards to having a joint facility where it can be shared because most of the animals are coming from the Sierra Vista area anyway. It would be probably the best from a cost standpoint for both entities to look at pursuing a shared facility and a shared service agreement with. So we're still in the process of discussing an agreement with the county on that. Of course, they could choose to do something different, but I think it makes a lot of sense to have some sort of a joint agreement with them moving forward.
Mayor, this is Rachel.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that joint agreement not only includes the construction of the building, but also includes ongoing costs. Yes, Rachel.
I just wanted to say that just a reminder is that even though some of these projects may not come to fruition, we have to have it in the budget in order to be able to carry them out should the decision be made to do so.
Yes, ma'am.
And I doubt very seriously that we would be implementing building or starting construction within the next fiscal year anyway, but it would be a placeholder there in the event we got that far at that point. But I would think that would be more a project that would probably show up in the year after's budget.
My question on that was really because had been that effort for the county to build an additional animal shelter somewhere, and I don't know where their mind's at or what they're thinking, but I know that citizens outside of Sierra Vista are pushing for that and have petitioned for that. And so if that effort prove successful, I feel like the animal control expansion would be a moot point.
It may well be because of the public action. My impression, speaking with the supervisors, is that they realize they got a county that's 90 by 90 miles, and having one shelter that's run by the county to cover the entire county doesn't make sense, just because of the transport time to bring animals to the shelter, etc. So I think right now they're predisposed, despite the petition, to look at working with cities for regional shelters. And there may still be a shelter in Bisbee, I don't know. But again, just based on the geographic distance, it's almost impractical to do it that way. So we'll see.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I also want to clarify that the $2 million is a very rough estimate. We won't know the actual cost until after the design is complete.
Okay.
Jen, this is Carolyn. The roof repairs, which buildings is that for?
The roof repairs is for the library, fire stations 1 and 2, and the recoding on the police department.
Thank you.
Hey, Jen, this is William.
Yes, sir.
No, that's the City Hall electrical analysis.
Yes.
I don't know if he hit it yet, but that's the sound system, the video, etc., right?
No, sir. So the electricity right now at City Hall is at max capacity, and before we can do anything to City Hall, we actually need to have that analysis complete.
Okay.
The load issue.
The question, William, I think is good. Chuck, you want to talk about what we're doing for future council meetings and our ability to broadcast effectively?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you're aware, our current audio-visual system for the broadcast of council meetings is on its last legs, and actually could go out at any time. So I have asked Mr. Rubio to look at costs for the rated system so we can broadcast more effectively in the future. That is not on the list, and I don't have that exact number yet, but if we get that here soon, it would also be added to the list as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor or Chuck, this is Gwen. And my question has to do with the roof at the library. It seems, didn't we do work on that roof just a couple of years ago? And where does this repair work fit into what was done before?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Calhoun, absolutely. We have done other roof repairs on the library, and that long ago. So I think we still have other areas of the roof that still need to be done. We did not do all of it. It's being done in phases, basically. So unfortunately, we still need to do that.
I see. I was curious if that was some repairs on the repairs, and
I don't think so, but if somebody wants to jump on and correct me, they're welcome to.
Mr. Mayor, this is Sharon. Can you hear me?
Ma'am.
All right. The roof repairs a few years ago at the library were intended to address, I'll call it the skylight system.
The tiles.
It's a clear roofing membrane, and it failed during a microburst. Portions of it blew off. That type of roofing system is just used over the front entry area. The rest of the library roof is, I'll call it a more conventional system, and that is the portion that is being addressed as part of this project. What we addressed previously was just that clear membrane system.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon.
All right, thank you, Sharon.
Mayor, members of the council, I do believe that the audio system for your council has already been included in the IT's budget.
Okay.
Going over that for the O&M.
Thank you, Jen.
I think we're ready to go to carryover, Jen.
Okay, so on the carryover projects from 2020, the first one's going to be the Veterans Memorial Park and the Rothery Center irrigation improvements. So Rothery is in extreme need for a new irrigation system. And also they're discussing how the pump at the well needs to be dropped lower and a new storage tank installed to supply enough water for Veterans Memorial Park and for the Rothery. The second and third is the Soldier Creek and James Landwehr improvements. They are currently in progress. The final item isn't exactly a carryover. It's a FY 2020 entitlement if approved. And as you guys heard, the CDBG has been extended due to the pandemic. So any questions on the carryover projects? Okay, the slide after that is titled Vehicles. The first item is the annual vehicle replacement for the PD, expected to purchase 7 vehicles total for the police department. Items 2 through 6 are a prioritized list from various departments from our 5-year vehicle replacement plan. We also added 2 refuse trucks to replace older equipment. That'll help us save on maintenance costs. And then we have the 2 Airbach bus replacements. These are an 80-20 split. However, this may change because there is a new grant opportunity that we are learning about as we speak.
Excuse me, this is Carolyn.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi. I thought the fleet, I'm sorry, the refuse trucks came out of the enterprise fund.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, they just weren't, I'm sorry, they just weren't, the fund just wasn't added on that.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then last on the list, if we're able to, we're going to add a new fire truck. So the fire department is requesting either a PTE or an engine. So any questions on the vehicles? The next slide, HERF. The first item is for the Fry Boulevard design and construction. So it states federal funds, however, the federal is going to pass it to the state, so it's really state funding. The state funds is the $2 million, and then there's a contingency to increase the 50,000. That's what the plus 50,000 means. The second and third is the annual pothole repair and the annual street maintenance. And then the last one is the annual rotation of 3 vehicles to replace.
I just have a question on this, if I can. I don't know whether Chuck or you can answer this. We already put out a list of what we still gonna do for street maintenance for this year. That's on track, I hope. $1.5 million. Have we come up with a list of the areas that are gonna be paved for the street maintenance? Or is that forthcoming?
Sharon, can you address that?
That list is forthcoming. We are working on that right now, but needless to say, there's always the need out there. So we don't doubt that we'll be able to use all of that funding, and we are making the final revisions to the list, and we'll have that information available soon.
I just need to see that. The other thing just want to say while I got you on there, Sharon, is I'm assuming the reason you have vehicles on this one as well as the one is because these are street vehicles that are being paid for through the HERF funds.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, got it. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else?
No, sir.
The next slide is titled Airport. contains the site improvements to remove the dirt mountain at the airport. And it isn't cash, I apologize. It's going to come out of the airport fund. The last slide is the capital improvement plan years 2 through 5. So this is the prioritized list for future years. The ones marked strategic plan has been placed in this future years area because staff has to finish current planning efforts before we can fund these items. So several of the items are pending until a master plan are completed. For example, the sports complex improvements, the Veterans Park improvements, Rothery Center, all those are waiting for a parks master plan. The multi-use path program is waiting on a master plan. So once those are approved, then we can go ahead with certain projects. Are there any questions on any of these items? No? Okay. So that completes my part of the presentation. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good job. David, we appreciate it. We're looking forward to more information, I'm sure. As questions come up, I know the council people will be hunting you both down, so be careful.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can I just ask on this last slide? I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak up and it wasn't cooperating for a minute. Where was it? I was going to ask. Oh, mobile command post. Can you explain that?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, Councilman Pacheco, we do have a mobile command post that we use on location early during emergency or critical incident scenes. It is old, but it is in one of the out years, and we'll just have to take it year by year in terms of when we can fit that in. Chief, if you're on, maybe you could give a little more background on it.
Yes, thank you, Chuck, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's the command post has been in our fleet for quite some time. It is quite outdated in some of its communications equipment. It is still useful for us on the scene. So this would be an upgrade. We have looked into upgrading and renovating this current command post. And it appears that it would be more economical to purchase a new one that has the upgraded equipment in it and is also probably a little bit more maneuverable for us when we bring it out on scene. So this would be, a few years out probably as we look at this, but it's something that we wanted to get on the board for future consideration.
Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I also wanted to give you a quick thing on the timeline. So the next work session for April 21st, we're going to discuss revenue, personnel, and O&M. The next one for May 12th is going to be the balanced budget. So you should be expecting your tentative budget book around May 22nd, and then we'll start the one-on-one council meetings.
Questions for Jen before she goes?
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it. We'll now move on to council executive report by the city manager. Chuck.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Obviously, our past month or so has been, dominated by the coronavirus and the various changes that we've had with as a result of that. So we just still have to carry on with things like budget and, departmental functions, particularly in public safety and public works. And then we're continuing on with normal operations. The things that are probably suffering and getting put off are a lot of our meetings, as I mentioned at the start, pertaining to CCOM, pertaining to water meetings, and other meetings that we normally have with regards to legislative issues. So those are probably suffering and being pushed back a bit. hopefully, as we move into the next month, we'll be able to start picking up the normal workload as we go along. So, one of those items that has been pushed off is the tribute master plan discussions with Castle and Cook. And certainly we would be anxious to pick that up once again. So we've got a number of things going on. Also, as we move into the next executive report, and as we talk about the COVID-19 emergency here later on in this particular meeting, we need to focus on what the future is going to look like, not only in terms of our budget and revenues and what we're able to accomplish, but what the community may end up looking like as well. Obviously, I don't want to get too far ahead, but certainly we're trying to address the issue and the spread of the virus here. But also, we have many businesses and people laid off and suffering as a result of this that we need to go. So I'll open it up to any other questions that you have, and the department heads are all online if you have questions about their individual portions of the report.
Who's going first?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay, so this is why I questioned the budget item that, in the same meeting, we were presented with the budget item to expand the animal shelter, and then the police department section of the executive report focuses on the animal shelter. And it brought up a lot of questions for me. The listing out that we're taking in like hamsters and gerbils, and then that we're taking in, let's see, lizard, skunks. Like, why are we taking in wild animals? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, why is the animal shelter taking in hamsters, gerbils?
Those aren't wild animals.
Exotic pets.
You know what I mean? Like, why are we doing that? And then foxes, raccoons, ringtail cats. It's listed out. Bats. Like, why are we taking in bats? And then and none of the animals were euthanized for lack of space. That is not, the euthanizations that happened were not due to lack of space. And so I am just kind of baffled at the desire to spend $2 million on a renovation. That's all. I get that. When you look at the report and what was listed here, I
don't think we're setting up a bat house, but I'll let the chief or Chuck address that.
Chief, can you talk about why we have to deal with other types of animals?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Most of the items like skunks are required as part of our rabies eradication and dealing with the rabies within the community. All those animals that would be considered wild animals, as in skunks, foxes, those types of deals, have to be dealt with on that basis. All the skunks that are taken in are euthanized, and they have to be sent up for testing for rabies as part of state law. The other items are pets that have either gotten loose or people are turning them in because they can no longer care for them. And then those are adopted out. Those very small animals are in other cages. They do not take up space in the dog kennel runs. What we're concerned with on the expansions have to do with the number of dog kennel runs that we have and the number of dogs that we can keep in the facility, as well as the cats. The other items, if you can see, the numbers of them are so small and minor, they don't really affect much of what we deal with. But they are part of the service, as in people turning in pets just like their dogs and their cats that they cannot care for anymore, either because they're moving or something else happens in the family, they're not able to care for them. And then we are able to adopt those out. The vast majority of what we deal with are the dogs and cats, but the others are part of that requirement. The bats are also a requirement that we deal with, and those are also put down and sent up for testing. as part of the rabies eradication and dealing with that whole instance. So the lack of space that we talk about has to do with the number of dogs and cats that we deal with. And one of the main reasons why we don't euthanize for lack of space is our ability to adopt. And we do a lot of transfers to Humane Society and other shelters as we get full, so that we do not get to the point where we have to euthanize animals.
Chief, also,
Go ahead.
no, I just was going to say, and to add on to what Chief Thresher was saying, is we have quite a few people that foster dogs and cats in our community, and without them, we'd also have a major space problem.
This is Gwen, and my question is, notice there were a lot of requests to euthanize pets who are old or ill. I'm wondering, does our facility charge to do that?
We do charge a nominal fee for that. We do as part of that service. Again, these are at the owner request because the animal is elderly or it's injured. And that's the majority of what we deal with euthanasia. But it is done as a service provided to lower income individuals, especially that can't afford to have that done. But there is a nominal fee that pays for the costs of the euthanasia.
Gwen, this is Christine. If I can speak up on this, my Rotary actually just did a tour of the animal shelter, and Arlene was amazing. And that was one of the things that she spoke about, is that it is totally a service that we do for the community, and they do such an amazing job. They actually have a light out there, so when they are euthanizing an animal, they put it on so that people can be respectful of what's happening.
Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just personally don't want to encourage more people to drop off animals. That's just, there you go. That's my comment.
Got it.
I want to encourage that behavior.
I don't understand how what we're doing is encouraging people to drop off animals. I think what we're doing is trying to make sure that we are taking care of the animals that we can. And I think as a city, we are doing a great thing. Also, sorry, this is Christine.
Mr. Matuchik wants to make a comment.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and just going back to the whole animal shelter project, the capacity expansion, and certainly when you look at $2 million, that's a big number, and that's very understandable. I think, though, part of this is going to be an analysis of what our future capacity needs are, and then what the county's capacity needs are based on the number of animals they're taking in and the projections for the future. So it's highly probable that the county would be footing the bill for a large portion of that number.
Okay, any other subject on the city manager's report?
We're only on the animal control part of it.
I know. Are we done with that? I'm ready to move on.
To
whatever other questions you have about the executive report.
I'm looking at my note.
Question, and this is for I know Chief Thrasher is on the line, and I think so is Chief Jones. Have we seen any difference in the last month in reports or calls or anything? And I know that that's not reported in the executive report, but that is something that I'm being asked by members of our community.
Being a number of the volume of calls?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Guys?
This is Chief Thrasher. On the police side, initially we saw a pretty good decrease over the first couple weeks of this pandemic in our calls for service. Last week, we have seen a pretty good increase. In fact, we took well over 15 vehicle burglary calls this morning. And we are seeing an increase in some fights and domestic calls for service, which we expected as people are stuck at home. So initially we saw a decrease. We're starting to see kind of a steady stream at the moment. We'll have to see how this plays out in the next couple of weeks to see if this will be, whether or not it'll be a significant increase or not.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Mayor Mueller, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we have not seen a market increase in our call volume. As a matter of fact, it may have gone down a little bit based on, we think people are actually just staying home. The ER has also seen a decrease in their volume, but we're preparing for the next 2 weeks, and that's what the CDC recommendations are saying, that we're probably going to get a surge in the next 2 weeks to the beginning of May, and we're just gearing up for that as well as the hospital.
Thank you, Chief.
Anything else on the executive report?
One question, just for fun. I did not know we were building a pump track. Where are we building a pump track? They've been asking about that for a long time.
By the Pius.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I know Ms. Wilson is listening in, but I think her audio is out from her end. But what we're looking at is the land that the city purchased on the curve of Highway 90. It runs by the Domingo Paez fields, and the pump track would be a bicycle track, primarily, obviously for youth purposes, but it would be a good use of that property as we look to develop it in the future. And I know that Ms. Wilson is also working with community groups to attempt to get other funding and volunteers in to help with that particular project.
Well, there's a whole community that does competitions on pump tracks.
Right.
They've been begging for a pump track in the city for a long time.
Hi, can you guys hear me now? This is Laura.
There she is.
Oh, yay, I'm off mute. Hi. Yeah, Sarah, we're very excited about it, and community volunteers are actually, they were geared up and they started on it. We have all the dirt in place. Once we get on the other side of the COVID thing, we should have that done very quickly. We're very excited.
Alrighty. It's exciting.
Okay, next.
My last comment, and then I'll leave it alone. Well, I guess 2 comments. 3 comments.
No, just one.
Okay. Really excited about the new art studio. Really excited about that. And was glad to see an update on that. I'm also glad to see the drop-in energy use thanks to the Schneider Electric project. That was very positive note in the report. And then the other was, I really hate the graph that we use for ridership data. It is not very clear, and I'm wondering if that can be changed in the future.
Say that again. I didn't get all that.
The graph, the Vista Transit ridership.
The graph. Okay, the graph in the report. Okay, got it.
That's just a comment. It's not very clear. I mean, the way that it's like some dotted lines and some straight lines and some diamond lines. I don't know. There's a better way to present that data, I think. In my opinion. But what does ridership mean? Is it the number of riders or is it the number of trips in a month? On that graph.
Be the number of riders in a month.
Mr. Mayor, it's Sharon. And certainly, Councilwoman Pacheco, if you want to contact me offline, I can talk with you about different ways that we could make that presentation more clear. But basically what the data indicates is what we call the number of embarkations, the number of people who get on the bus. Now that does not count transfers. Those are counted as a new ride because our driver has no way to know if somebody has just transferred from another route or if they were dropped off in a car at the transit center or any other condition. Now, one thing we have noted, which is part of the reason the data looks a little bit odd, and it's showing what would appear to be a dramatic decrease this year. That's due in large part to our new routing system. When we put that into place on July 1, we reduced the number of transfers. We increased the number of single-seat rides. Before, if you were on the west end, you had to transfer at the transit center to get to shopping destinations. Now that is a single-seat ride. We take you from the west end all the way to Fry's or Food City or other grocery stores you want to go to. So that is the reason for the apparent drop-off is we no longer have those transfers. So this year's data will look a little bit anomalous. Starting next year, we'll be able to compare it year over year again.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. And the last question is on the economic development. And then someone else can go into their questions. But my last question on this was there was discussions with the flight school for use at the airport or something. And it was my understanding that we couldn't do any kind of business at the airport that had touch and go. It had to be up and out. An up and out type aviation business, not touch and go aviation business. Is that different?
Council Member Pacheco, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the short answer is that was the long-standing kind of rule with the airport, and we've been working with the airport manager for 2.5 years. So we've had some initial discussions on the flight school with Carol Thompson. So we're attempting to find a way to make both the business work and reduce the impact on Fort Huachuca Libby Army Airfield. So effectively, the conversation is progressing, and we're trying to pursue those lines. So.
Okay. But the Fort Huachuca is open to that conversation.
Correct.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. Who else? Anybody else? Once? Twice? Okay, well now that should end the questions on the executive report. We'll now ask for any reports on recent trips, meetings, or future meetings. And I will tell you, as far as meetings go, when we get down to the COVID, when we get to the council discussion on COVID, I'm going to talk about some of the meetings I've been having via teleconference to update you on. But is there anybody else? Hopefully nobody's taking trips.
Nobody's taking trips.
Mayor, I'll just say that there's a couple of things I've done through conference calls, and I'll just write up a blurb and send to you and then to Jill for her to send out, so I don't take up time talking about it right now.
Okay. Anybody else? We're not gonna talk about board and commission liaison updates since we have no boards and commissions unless there's something unless you got a hot item out there.
I just have one thing, Mayor.
Okay.
The last Commission on Disability Issues meeting, I think the group finalized a resource guide that covers all of the disability services for people with disabilities in the area.
Excellent.
And, in the Community Development Department was extremely helpful in getting that put together, and all of the members of the commission gave the information that helped put it together. So it's available I would just go, it's easiest to go to Community Development to get a copy of it, but you can also access it online.
Well, and that's the thing we need to make sure people understand, and we have it prominently displayed on our computer system so people from the community can see it. So we need to make sure that that happens.
Thank you.
Good job.
Awesome. I had unless you want to give it, Mayor, the update MPO meeting.
I didn't prepare anything for that. I was focused on the COVID. If you want to anything, please do.
Okay. Well, I think the biggest things from that meeting, and Rachel could chime in as well if she has anything, but I thought really important to highlight that out of our MPO meetings, the Ramsey Road crosswalk project is hopefully going to be done by next month. And that crosswalk being put in at Ramsey Road and Highway 92 is not being an impact to county or city or MPO funds. It's an ADOT project, but it came out of conversations at the SBMPO meeting, thanks to Supervisor Borer. And then also the Huachuca City contract was finalized. And so we hope to see the emergency signal going up on Highway 90 in Huachuca City, 6 to 9 months out, right? We hope. Right?
Everybody needs to know the delay is what we had a couple of years ago. They got to have the right type of pole that can handle the 70-mile-an-hour winds, and those are always on back order.
Okay. I think the only thing like that, trying to see what else I was saying that we should bring up, but the other, where is it? The MPO completed the study for the Avenida Escuela Bridge. Right, was that the MPO covered that? And then
Was the hydrology study for the bridge.
So that was completed. I think that's all. Those were the key points that I wrote down. I didn't know if you or Rachel had something else you want to add.
Did you want to add anything on that?
No, that was part of the thing I was talking about. I would write up, but the only other thing is, and sorry, if I didn't hear Sarah say this, but the agreement with the city looked at between the MPO and the city, and that'll be coming to us soon.
Yeah, that should be approved by the MPO, and then it'll come to the city soon. We'll get with Chuck to get it scheduled on the council agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, then. Future discussion items and council requests. All right, since everybody's jumping up, I'm going to go ahead and start with the council discussion on COVID-19. What I'd like to do is basically give you a 3-part report. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've been doing. Chuck's going to be talking about what he's been doing in the city staff and what he's got going on. And then we're going to have the chief, who is the presumptive, how do I say this? Presumptive incident commander. Should we declare an emergency as a city? And I'll explain a little bit about where we are on that as well. First of all, we have an emergency management plan. I would encourage you all, as you have time, to have the staff to get out for you and go through that. Under the emergency management plan, the mayor can declare an emergency. Right now, there's not a need for the mayor to do that since the governor's already done that for the whole state. The emergency basically allows us to access federal funds and get additional assistance when that happens. But right now, we can get that through the governor. It also our emergency plan also requires us to set up an emergency operations center where we have an incident commander. In this case, the presumptive guy would be the chief of police, since obviously the fire chief with the first responders has got his hands full meeting this crisis. That decision by our plan is up to the mayor to make based on the recommendation of the city manager. I will tell you right now, after the first meeting with the county health department we had 3 weeks ago on Friday or 4 weeks ago on Friday, whatever it was. I was impressed with what they were doing. I've had the chiefs been attending their meetings on a regular basis, either in person or on phone. They've been very cooperative and helpful. If I felt that they weren't effective, I would go ahead and stand up our emergency management. I would enact our emergency management plan and set up our EOC, but right now they appear to be meeting all our needs, and we'll continue to operate that way. A couple other things I did in the first couple of weeks. Well, actually, I wanted to mention something else. The county health department. I was impressed in our first meeting when I reminded them that the weak link in the fire was the ability to actually communicate and make sure that the nursing homes were ready and available to evacuate people, because they seemed like they were the ones that were being left out of the net on all things. And I highly suggested to our director that she get with those folks and basically lean on them hard to make sure we were taking care of the elderly, especially since that was one of the key groups that could be affected by this. And basically, having visited to one of the nursing homes to deal with a concern of somebody, I say a constituent's family, since they were from San Diego, to get her in contact with them. I did visit one of the nursing homes, and believe me, they're very strict as who they allow to enter, if anybody. And they're taking care of our seniors and our most vulnerable, and that's probably why, knock on wood, we haven't had folks in those facilities come down with this issue yet. So we're lucky there. I also visited the hospital. I talked with Mr. Gomes. The purpose was to make sure that I understood what his capabilities were, where his concerns were, and opening up the lines of communications so that he knew that if before we would get to a situation where we were short on PPE or ventilators or rooms or medical staff, that he would call me, and so that I could join in with his voice to the governor and whoever else was necessary to make sure that we had the items available to take care of our folks. I also want to share with you, there's been a series of teleconferences, I'll put it that way. And I think it's very interesting the way the governor has organized this. He's got key staff members. One deals specifically with mayors. Another one deals with county supervisors. Of course, there's the health folks. And he's got specialists in business dealing with small businesses and large businesses. And they had regular teleconferences. It started that we were doing, the mayor's conference was every week or every day for a while. 2 weeks ago, they switched to Monday and Thursdays at 10:30. And if there's two of you at a time that want to sit in and listen, I would welcome you to do that. Mr. Patuchik joins me in those calls, and the mayors have direct input to the situation, both local issues as well as statewide issues. And I will tell you, the gentleman that does it for the mayor's conference has done a good job. I've sent him a couple of short emails, and we've gotten immediate responses, and they're well aware of what's going on across the state. And I'm sure these folks will get in a room with the governor on a regular basis and brief everything that's going on to the governor for his decision making, which is a great way, I think, to manage this crisis. So he's got the latest. He's got the word from the horse's mouth, and knows what's really going on the ground. We've also had teleconferences with the two senators, and we got another one coming up, actually for both of them this week. And they tend to focus on things like the loans and the evictions and those kind of things that the federal legislation deals with, and are trying to help unstick some of the tight spots that people are finding. We also had conference call as well as personal calls with our representative up at the federal level as well. She's done a great job of keeping us informed and listening as well. So I'm very pleased with the representatives that we have at the federal level and the governor. I've also, just so you know, I did attend a meeting with the Post. The Post kept the channels open. We talked things through. There were a number of recommendations that we talked before they were installed by the Post, And she's got, the general up there has kind of a unique situation. There's things you can do, there's things you can't do. She's now getting additional guidance from higher headquarters. When I say guidance, sometimes it's you will do this, not you have the option to do this. And so it's a unique environment. And we were joined by Representative Nutt at the meeting we had. She was very interested in what was going on locally and what the status is. And she and I have had a couple of conversations as well, although she obviously doesn't have the capability to do large phone-in events on a regular basis, but we are talking. I've appeared with the chamber on business on Friday night, on Friday evenings, to talk about what's going on in the week and specifically talk about impacts on business. You need to know that Tony and Mike from the economic development crew have been doing a good job of pushing out information to both the Sierra Vista Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the Arizona Regional EDF, and the Cochise College Business Development Center, to make sure that people have all the information and all the access, especially on the federal issues that have allowed money for loans and everything else. I made a comment at the chamber a week ago Friday. That was the day they had passed the legislation for the money coming out for the small business loans. And I said at that time, it was going to take some time to actually get the money out because of the amount of small businesses that were eligible, as well as the fact that in most rural communities over the last 15 to 20 years, the person that makes decisions on loans is no longer in the communities. They're in Tucson or Phoenix or San Francisco or Alabama or Virginia or New York. And they're adjusting, and I'm sure you've read and seen all the issues since Friday when they opened this up, and that's going to continue. The only thing we can tell folks is you have to be persistent and work with your loan officers in the banks and the credit unions to make sure that you will be successful in getting your loan. So persistence will pay, because as we know, any new program in government, there's going to be bugs in it. And speaking of bugs, I want to talk about some of the executive orders just briefly. There's a sign. Let me get the right number here. I think it's 14. Executive Order 2020-15. And that's the one that basically says for the individual who's been affected by coronavirus, and he has a whole list of things, it says you have to meet this criteria before they will stop your evictions to houses. It also talks about how if they meet one of those criteria and there's 5 or 6 of them, and once they receive their eviction notice, they have to go back to their landlord and says, hey, I meet this portion of the governor's decree. And that's kind of the process. But one of the things here is the next to last paragraph of the executive order. It says, no provision contained in this executive order shall be construed as relieving any individual from any obligation to pay rent or comply with any other obligation that the individual may have under tenancy. So basically, if the 5 items above don't apply to him, they still have to pay their rent, which kind of makes sense, but people are confused about that. Let's see. The other thing I want to talk about briefly is the business eviction. There's another, I don't have the number. There's another talks about business eviction, and what's supposed to happen is businesses that are renting their premises from a landlord are not supposed to be evicted during this time period as well, and it's less restrictive than the homes. So the next thing I want to talk is about the stay-at-home order, which is the 2020-18, and this has been ever evolving. We have basically enforced all the restrictions that are on this and as well as the clarification on beauty shops, tattoo parlors, massage therapy, etc., that came out later. And again, this is the one that says stay at home. There are folks out there that are confused by stay at home. They think that because we're a stay at home order, we shouldn't go out for anything. And obviously the smart people, instead of having both mom and pop go out to the store, either mom goes or pop goes, and they limit the space, and they still do the social distancing. The last thing I say, I would ask you to read the council file that we have together, because Yvette is doing a good job of getting a lot of the questions answered that I get. And if there are questions you get that you need to share with me, please do that. But I will tell you, for example, we had one a couple days ago where basically an individual sent me a note that had like 8 or 9 questions, and they were all dealing with philosophical things, political things, etc. And I just said, thank you for your concern. Well, today he sent me back another very heartfelt piece of information that basically accused me of all kinds of things, and that's fine. But I'm not going to answer those type of questions, and especially if he's more concerned that I didn't take the time to engage him, because quite frankly, I got better things to do with my time right now. If this was a normal place, I'd be happy to meet him and discuss all the philosophical and political questions that he may have. And you probably have seen his stuff on the internet as well, but you need to know that's going on. So I would look forward to seeing any questions and comments you have from the people that you think is worth my consideration. And with that, I'm going to shut up and move to Mr. Patuchik.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the mayor has mentioned, he's been our primary interface with the federal and state agencies, elected officials, the business community, answering citizen concerns, and putting out press releases and approving those. So I appreciate the efforts that he's put in terms of doing that, because it takes a lot of burden off. In terms of my role in this, I'm primarily concerned with the employees, number one, and then of course the facilities and what we've had to do in order to respond to the governor's executive orders, CDC recommendations, and of course federal legislation that has been coming down. With regards to that, our philosophy has been to follow the CDC recommendations and the governor's executive orders to the greatest extent we can. When those come out, consult with the mayor, and we talk about facilities or activities that need to be closed and those kind of things. So as you've seen, we've been taking a very gradual approach in terms of facility closures and outdoor activities and those kind of things. So we've been doing that to the point where we're pretty much all shut down in terms of our facilities and programming right now. And of course, transit is probably the most difficult one we've had to deal with because of the needs of that particular community in terms of using transit, but trying to balance that with the obvious concerns about potentially spreading the virus as our buses are going out. But we're working closely with staff and meeting with staff and talking through the issues and trying to find ways to address and mitigate some of those concerns. So that's where we're at in terms of facilities, on employees. Obviously, that has been a major challenge in terms of how we're dealing with that. The philosophy there was first, everybody is going to get paid, and we're going to do everything we can to avoid layoffs and those types of things. And we've been successful in doing that. The balance there is obviously we have public safety personnel, police and fire that are still out there doing their jobs and doing a great job doing it, as we go through some of these changes. Obviously, Public Works employees are still out there because it's necessary for their functions to continue, like refuse, streets, and those types of things. So really what we're dealing with then is the admin staff and then the leisure and library staff in particular. We have a lot of part-timers and that type of thing to deal with. So we've tried to find work because I just don't feel it's fair to the public and to the other employees that have to be out there every day. Everybody should be working to receive a paycheck, in my opinion, and that's what we've tried to do. Now, we've also tried to balance out that with social distancing and those types of, new terms that we've all had to come to grips with here. And as such, we've implemented a lot of work from home or alternative work schedules and people swapping out time with others. So they'll come in for a few days and then their counterpart will come in for a few days. And the reason for that, obviously, is to reduce the numbers of people in the buildings. And if you came out, you would see that the population in the buildings is fairly sparse. But also a recognition that employees may not necessarily be used to working from home or feel that they want to contribute during an emergency and serve the public. And that therefore the alternative work schedules and people swapping out with others is extremely important, I think, for their mental health and also for their ability to want to serve the public during this time. So that's been very important. Of course, we've had a raft of federal legislation and changing requirements when it comes to dealing with employees and leave and those types of things. So that's kept Ms. Fleming very busy in HR in terms of how we're dealing with all that, making sure everybody is treated properly as the new laws and regulations come down to us. And there was certainly a flurry of activity there, and we were learning on the fly there, but I think we've got a lot of those issues worked out at this point. So, that is very important. Obviously, the PIO function is also extremely important during this time, and Ms. Hector and Mr. Curtis have been very instrumental in terms of helping us gather information, put together press releases, and of course, getting information out to the council was very important during a time like this as well. And we're really focused on that. So please let us know if your needs are being met and you're getting all the information that you need, because we certainly want to make sure that you get it. And don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call me if you have any issues or just want to know about different things that are going on. So that's been primarily what we've been dealing with. Of course, we're monitoring information as it comes in, and I do sit in with the mayor, and it's good to get an idea of what's going on nationally, statewide, and of course in the county. Now, we have not put up our emergency operations center like we did during the Monument fire. Primary reason for that is because the county health department is the lead agency and has stood theirs up with regards to this particular crisis. So we've been under that umbrella. I have Chief Thrasher and Chief Jones are both kind of in a unified command, although Chief Jones's responsibilities are a little different, but they have been attending a lot of meetings with the county, and then Chief Thrasher comes and reports to me information via either email and definitely comes to see me in person. Usually last person I talked to during a business day. So that's the activities that are going on there. A lot of things to balance. Of course, we have to think into the future as well, and of course, the current business that we have to conduct as well, and that gets into the budget then, and also with what we're trying to balance in terms of people staying at home and you know, and their jobs, and also the loss of businesses and the unemployment that we're dealing with, and how that's going to impact the community. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how that will affect us in the future. So it's just something we have to be aware of. We can't all get caught up totally in the here and now. We have to plan for how we're going to get out of this as well. So I spend time thinking of that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Chief Thrasher, and he can talk a little bit about the incident and the types of things that he's dealing with law enforcement and county health.
Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Mayor, members of council. Just to give you a quick update, as of 3:40 this afternoon, through the county health, we are still sitting at 9 confirmed cases. We have not had an increase as of today. There were also just real recently, as I look here, 4 new executive orders from the governor. One is restricting, has some certain restrictions on out-of-state travelers, and that they will have to self-isolate for 14 days if they come from an area that has a substantial spread. I have not had a chance to review that executive order yet at this point. I'm just looking at it as right now. There's also another one, strengthening protections for residential and nursing healthcare facilities. Another one, expanding data gathering for COVID-19. And then another one that provides some flexibility for restaurants regarding packaging of food. So like Chuck said, there's always a flurry of activity, seems to be near the end of the day. Almost always seems to be Friday. So luckily these two came out on a Tuesday. I am tied in directly to the county EOC. I'm on their website. I have it up on a daily basis. I'm also in contact with Gabe Levine, that is the county emergency manager, to get the updates as we see fit. On the law enforcement side, we are doing a lot of close patrols of shopping centers, particularly Walmart, Safeway, Fry's, Food City. The National Guard is helping out stocking shelves and bringing in trucks into Food City. That is the only chain that has requested help on the state level regarding that. We're providing some close patrols for security for the National Guard folks when they come into town. So things are moving pretty steadily. We are seeing a lot of activity. I know it's the stay-at-home order isn't quite a stay-at-home order. You can go out for essential activities. We have taken the approach regarding that, as in talking with individuals. We are not pulling people over just because they're out on the roadway. They'll have to do something else regarding that. Another violation of state law, and then we'll talk about the stay-at-home order and what people can be out and about for. With the closure of the city park amenities, the parks themselves must remain open, but those places like the skate park, the basketball courts, tennis courts, dog parks, where they can't maintain the social distancing, or we can't maintain sanitation like the playgrounds. We're just dealing with those on a community-oriented policing type mentality, where we're just going out and talking to folks and dealing with that on a case-by-case basis. We are still operating the police department as is. I know we have taken several complaints about us continuing to make traffic stops. We actually have seen an increase in some poor driving behaviors, I think because some people think they can get away with it at the moment. But we are still dealing with that. The officers have the discretion to wear face masks as they see fit. In those contacts, obviously, if we have information or if they are going into residences that has an indication that there might be somebody ill, they are taking the precautions that are necessary regarding that. So as I'm looking at where we're at regarding that, so far, manpower-wise, we have not been affected yet at the PD for it. We do have plans in place that if for some reason we were to lose bodies to either a quarantine type situation or the illness, we have an urgent schedule that would put officers on a 12-hour shift with days off that they could do on an extended period. So, and we could lose and we can maintain that schedule with a loss of up to about 20 bodies from the PD perspective. So we are all set in place in case this thing were to turn bad. Luckily, at this point, we're still sitting at 9.
Okay. Before Chief Jones come on, Chief Thrasher, not good to use the term bodies when you talk about a medical crisis. Just
that is true.
Chief Jones.
Thank you, Mayor Mueller and members of council. We are also operating under normal conditions. We are currently operating in the county EOC, overseeing the fire and EMS sections, and we are doing that virtually. And that's really going to be beneficial if it does. We do have an uptick in patients based on the ability to have one single point to get our operational needs out to the county. We are also locally at the fire stations checking our guys' temperatures at 8 o'clock in the morning and 8 o'clock at night, ensuring that we don't have any sick people here. Entry and exit to the stations is at one spot. We have ramped up the cleaning of the stations, really hitting the high hazard areas multiple times a day to ensure that we don't get anybody sick. On calls, CCOM has done a wonderful job with dissemination of information and question asking of patients when they call, meaning have you traveled? Do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? What kind of pre-existing medical conditions do you have? And this really is a precursor to how beneficial that EMD is going to be for our community, with the ability to ask pertinent questions for us to be able to determine what kind of treatment modalities we're going to get into. And also with the COVID, it's also allowing us to prepare for the proper PPE to treat the patients that we're seeing today. We are limiting patient contact, addressing patients 6 feet away, as well as having patients walk out to us. We don't have to enter their home if they are able to. If we need to go in full force, we will based on the patient needs, but we are trying to limit contact as well. We also have contingency plans and really have been going over a myriad of scenarios where how we will staff if something happens locally to us, and what units will be a priority to staff in order to successfully serve the community when they need us the most. But our guys and gals are doing a yeoman's job. I'm really proud of them. Deputy Chief Deaver and myself have been going around to the stations and really reassuring them and thanking the guys and gals of how well we are performing. And it really stands to say that we hear it throughout the community. Man, thank you for what you're doing, and we're really appreciative of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Jones. I'm going to make a couple quick comments, and I'm going to open it up for other questions from the council. I forgot to mention earlier in a email I got today from Mr. Blank, who is the governor's guy that talks to the mayors. He has one item here that I know Gwen is going to be interested in, and it covers certified farmers markets. It says the Arizona Department of Health Services is developing guidance for farmers market operations during this emergency. There's a couple things there. I am not going to open up on city property the farmers market until I get that guidance, number one. And two, whether we can figure out who certified, we still haven't figured out who certifies farmers markets, and if in fact the farmers market that operates here is a certified farmers market by state standards. So that should answer Gwen's question. And again, I'll say I'm a fan of farmers markets. I think they provide great produce, and we want to get them up and running as much as possible. Next item I want to say, I'll talk about help. I'll give you an example of Councilman Reardon during the fire. He was going around town and he saw something that we weren't aware of, and that was basically people were needing places to board horses and get feed for horses, etc. And it wasn't something that was on our radar screen as a city, because obviously we don't allow horses in city limits, but our neighbors who were affected by the fire obviously had concerns about that. And he asked if he could kind of take that over and make sure that those horses were boarded properly and they got feed and everything else they needed. And he did a good job of doing that. I know our neighbors to the south appreciated that. So if you see something out there that doesn't look right or could be better, please talk to me, talk to Chuck. And if you're willing to pitch in, your hands are always welcome and your fine minds are always welcome to try to make this event as less impactful for folks as possible. The last comment I'm going to make before I turn it over to you guys is I want to talk about a little bit about the future. I have already asked questions of our governor's office, and again, they're working on it. This is the response I got, is once it looks like this thing is getting ready to subside, what are the best ways to, and what are the first steps we need to take to get back to a normal operation of our community? And they're working on it. I've offered to give input and discussion about it. But now is the time before we get to that point to talk about what the ramifications are of each action and kind of war game it through so we know how we get to the future. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or comments from anybody. Please identify yourself.
Rick, this is Gwen.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the update about farmers markets. And who did you say was working on some rules or something for them?
The Arizona Department of Health Services developing guidance, and that this comes from an email I got today, just after lunch, from Mr. Ben Blink, who's the guy that handles the calls from the mayors.
Okay, thank you so much for that update. And Rick, I'm going to have to run to leave the meeting right now. Thank you. I wanted to say thanks to you and to Chuck and to all the staff for those extensive, detailed reports. That was really helpful to hear. And particularly want to thank, oh gosh,
the chiefs and
Judy.
Yeah, Judy's doing a good job
for those for the information she's sending out to us. I know everybody is working really hard to keep things in place, and we all appreciate it very much. So thank you again. I'm going to have to leave the meeting right now.
Bye, Gwen.
Bye.
Hey, this is Christine. I just wanted to add in here, and this may or may not be the time, but I understand I am a small business owner, and I am closed during this time. It's a decision that my husband and I made. I understand everything that the small business owners are going through, and I understand it's hard. Trust me, I think I totally understand it's hard. I appreciate, I've spoken to Chuck about how we can move forward. Mr. Mayor, I really appreciate you talking to everybody about how we move forward. And I just want to say to our small business owners, we can hang in there. And for the community, we can hang in there. Let's do what we can, and let's help each other.
And I appreciate those comments, because I've talked to a couple other small businesses that are in your situation, and quite frankly, it's heartbreaking. But we need to realize that there will be a future. We need to prepare ourselves the best way we can, and we need to get there as soon as we can.
Yes, sir. We will get there. I know that. I feel that. I do.
Great. Thank you, Christine. Next.
What Gwen said and Christine. Judy's been amazing with the updates. Thank you, Judy. And then the rest of the staff, Mayor, you and Chuck are doing a good job. So I appreciate everything.
Thanks, Will.
This is Sarah. I want to also reiterate that thank you. Wonderful update on what everyone's doing during this time is really difficult. And I know that you're all working so hard, and we've seen that and seen the evidence of that. I'm grateful also. I will say that I've had more than a few comments and questions put to me about how a stay-at-home order is enforced. So I'm grateful for the update from the chief. You know, people saying, oh, we can't go walking because we'll get arrested, or so there is some misconception about how that order is enforced and how the city funds to enforce. So I'm grateful for that update. Just letting you know, I did have one question. Do our emergency responders have enough PPE?
Chief Jones, are you still there?
Yes, sir, I am here. We are doing good right now. I have also been in contact with the hospital in reference to PPE, and fortunately, LifePoint, the hospital is part of the LifePoint conglomeration. We have some sister hospitals in the New Mexico and bordering states that have offered through the CEO Gomes that whatever areas hit the hardest, that's where the PPE is going to go. And we are rationing our PPE like everybody else is. And going back to what dispatch information that we are receiving based on calls, we are wearing the proper PPE and rationing it the best we can.
Okay.
Sarah, I want to mention again the email I got today from Mr. Blink. Under PPE, additional PPE, the governor announced the state has secured a new agreement with Honeywell to produce 6 million N95 masks for the state over the next 12 months. Obviously, that'll replenish the stocks we have, and it may take a while to get there. But upon production of the masks, the health department, state health department, will deliver them to the county health departments for further distribution for health and safety of the emergency response workers. So stuff is coming in the pipeline is the answer. Okay. Anything else, Sarah? I want to thank you particularly for all the good work you're doing with feeding people. And that's kind of another example of how as council people, we can get out there and help. So it's greatly appreciated, Sarah.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I would just echo everybody's what they said, how appreciative I am for you and the rest and staff on all the hard work and just tireless efforts. If you guys had a nickel for every time I thought to myself how grateful I am for all the work being put in, well, you wouldn't have to work, but the PIO and Judy, and I don't know the new guy's name who does the videos, they're doing such a great job in getting everybody informed online and through email. I see that and in the paper, and that census video that was mentioned in the council executive report, that has over 10,000 views. So I know that it has helped push the online census taking. And that's really important right now. So just want to say thank you guys for all your hard work. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess we haven't heard from the mayor, Madam Pro Tem.
Mayor, I think everyone has pretty much said everything I had planned to say. Is I'm just incredibly proud of our staff, and also as our mayor, I really appreciate that you've just come in and you've handled the difficult emails, the difficult questions, and also going out and talking, for example, to the grocery store managers and taking that on. So I really appreciate everything that's being done, and Judy's doing a fantastic job.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we've probably reached the end of our discussion tonight. I think this was good. I'll talk with Chuck about doing another session like this in 2 weeks at the work session, so everybody can keep up. And again, we're emailing as much stuff out as we can to the council. If you see stuff, please let me and Chuck know what you see that's going on that may not be quite right or is in fact a good thing. That's always nice to know too. We'll continue to work through the issue, and I want everybody to stay home, stay safe, and we'll get this thing figured out, and things will get better. Chuck, anything final words?
I think you just said it all, man.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I want to thank particularly Jill and the people from IT. It wasn't pretty today, but we got it done, and hopefully it'll be much improved on Thursday. Okay, with that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
My picture's been frozen for halfway through the meeting, but that's okay. They don't need to. Okay, well, we got through the meeting. We get through the meeting. But the thing is, we may not be able to broadcast Thursday. Okay. Well, it's audio only. It's audio only because of bandwidth. And you might want to. You need to mention when we start the meeting. You need to mention that we have bandwidth problems. The video cut out, so people will know. Do we have anybody other than one person? Hey. Public.
A lot of staff.
Yep. And that may be eating up the bandwidth too, huh? Yeah, I saw that too. You need IT. Look at it.